Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I have a review of an oracle deck that I've been working with for a number of months, which is the Le Vampire Oracle by Lucy Cavendish and Jasmine Beckett-Griffith. This deck is published by Blue Angel Publishing here in Australia, and the cards, there are 44 cards in the deck. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the energies of the vampires that work with you in this deck, and sort of really what this deck is good for. First off, I would definitely recommend it for beginners. I find that Lucy Cavendish and Jasmine Beckett-Griffith combined decks are really good to get you started into reading oracle cards. The guidebook to introduce the energies is really thorough, and it does provide like a little blurb or a jumping off point if you are not so comfortable with using your intuition completely yet. But that being said, this deck is really good for advanced readers too. It's really good for anybody within the spectrum that wants to work more within the shadow aspect of themselves. If you're going through some difficulties in your life, or a client is going through some difficulties, this deck is really communicative, and it will help you push past any of those blockages with your mental well-being or spiritual well-being as well. So I'm just going to show you a few of the favorite cards that I have in this deck, and again I'll go back to talking about specific vampire energy and how it might manifest itself when you use this deck. So I found that while using this deck, particularly within my more recent sort of difficulties that have been happening throughout my life, that I've been getting a lot of recurring messages, and that tends to happen when we don't pay attention really to what's being said, or we still need to work on what's being said. So this deck for me in particular does that quite a lot. The vampire energies of this deck are really sumptuous and really desirable and seductive, and as Lucy Cavendish does state in the guidebook, they are really good for sort of letting us remember that we have sort of a tendency to overindulge, which can create sort of problems of addiction and stuff. So you might hear some birds. They love to hang out in this garden, and they can be quite loud. Anyway, carrying on. So again, these are some of my favorite images from the deck, but I don't have any like non-favorite images. I love Jasmine Beckett-Griffith's artwork, as you probably know, and I do have a few of their Lucy Cavendish and hers combined decks. That wasn't a very good sentence, sorry. So as you can see, it has some of these far away sort of whole figure images, and then some close-up images, which are quite nice. So as I was saying before, the energies of the vampires in these cards are really sort of classical vampire energy. Like when I connect with this deck, I see a sort of sumptuous room, like rococo, golden, gilded, and dark candlelight. Like if you've ever watched the movie Interview with Vampire, like Louis and Lestat, particularly Lestat when he comes in and sort of takes control of Louis's household, that's the sort of vampires that are in this deck, like sort of aristocratic. But Lucy in her guidebook sort of says that because they've lived for so long and they've done so many things that they regret, they want to help you now because they're stuck in this form for eternity. They want to help you to realize that there are things that we can move past. So as I said, there are 44 cards in this deck. The card stock is pretty good. It's a little bit smaller than I've noticed Blue Angel has been. See, this is one of my favorite cards, sorry, the Maynard with the close-up, absolutely beautiful. It's a bit shiny and glossy, and because of this, the cards can stick together. I have damaged a few cards like this just from trying to peel them away from each other. So this is the guidebook itself, and I believe it is 135 pages. Not all of them obviously are dedicated to the card meanings, but there's a couple of advertising things at the back here. This is sort of, you get a little depiction of the card, the little blurb that comes on the card, and then you get vampire speak, so what the vampire's message is to you, and then you get the sort of blessing and the curse, and how to work with the card. So the blessing is the sort of right way up, and the curse would be reversals, but as someone who doesn't work with reversals, I tend to ignore that part. And then working with the card is sort of how you can incorporate its message into your everyday life. Now, there is one thing that I have to say about the guidebook, is that those messages are often conflicting. I'm not sure if the guidebook was rushed or whatever, but I often find that the vampire speak passage is more relevant to the actual card than the blessing or the working with the card, because sometimes it seems like those things are two different messages in themselves, which is a bit confusing sometimes. That's the only criticism that I have about this deck. The vampire energies in this deck are incredibly nurturing, but also very dark. So when you approach a deck like this, one that works with the shadow self and, sorry about the reflection in my glasses, one that works with the shadow self and one that is sort of helping you let go of trauma or that sort of negative energy that you have built up, it can be very hard, and some people get frightened. But the one thing that you shouldn't do ever is approach Oracle or Tarot with fear. Don't approach it with fear. These energies require your respect and your reverence, but you know, ultimately, if you're afraid of them, then that's never going to end up good for you, because you're feeding off your own fear rather than what you need to work on, which is that fear. So the energies of this are really quite powerful and quite dark, and I have found that they are incredibly healing for healing the shadow self, and particularly for people with mental illness who deal with anxiety and depression. I think that this deck is an amazing tool to help you understand why you might be experiencing certain emotions or feeling certain things, and helps you really to break down a strategy for dealing with what you're feeling. So this deck has been incredibly powerful in that respect. I haven't used it for other people yet. It has been quite a personal deck for myself. And I will show you a couple of the stones that I use that go with this deck. So the first stone that has been called to be used with this deck is my Kambaba Jasper. And it's absolutely beautiful dark green, and this reminds me of like a tree ring. So it's got a lot of ancient sort of wisdom and knowledge in here. Sort of like ancient forest energy is in this stone, and it reminds me of like that, just super ancient wisdom. Another stone that's really popular with this vampire deck and a lot of my other darker decks is my bloodstone. And I find that, especially with other readers, I have noticed that vampire energy in general, you know, feeds off blood, or it has that sort of feeding hunter energy, and they tend to really be drawn to this stone, bloodstone. So I definitely recommend, you know, just for a super powerful kick to your readings and connecting with those energies more fully, bloodstone is probably one of my most highly recommended ones to be working with that. So on the more practical aspect, the box by Blue Angel is amazingly sturdy. It's where I keep my cards. It has this gorgeous royal blue on the inside. And like I said, the guidebook is about 135 pages long. So not amazingly long for a Lucy Cavendish guidebook, and not amazingly thorough either for a Lucy Cavendish guidebook. But it works out nonetheless. I mean, I think you're sort of drawn to really connect psychically with this deck. Particularly in my case, I've noticed this deck is very sort of air and mentally orientated. So it's like I said, it's really helpful for issues surrounding your mental health and mental well-being, how to cope with stress, anxiety that so many of us experience in the everyday world. And it's really good for beginners as well, because it has that little blurb, that little tagline. It really feeds into your intuition. If you're not comfortable, you know, just reading off the cuff, or just you're not quite there yet with your intuitive reading skills. So the other way that I'm planning on using this deck, which I haven't done yet, is through ritual, because I feel like the psychic connection that I have with the vampire energies will be particularly conducive to spell work, particularly binding spell work or clearing spell work. I feel like these cards would be really good for if you were doing a cleansing of your spirit, of your aura, of your home, anything. I think that these cards and the energy of the vampires is really into kicking out all that negative energy, into understanding where it all comes from. That's why, as I've mentioned before, this deck is particularly good for shadow work. That dark night of the soul, as Lucy Cavendish mentions, and that sort of feeling displaced and feeling anxious and maybe having an addiction, or trying to come to grips with situations in your life that you can't truly understand. Usually a lot of those problems are very internal, and this deck really gets to, the very core of that. So, don't get this deck on a whim if you just think, oh, I like vampires, I'm going to buy this deck. I mean, you can. I'm not saying don't do it really, but it is a very deep deck, and it requires a lot of reverence, and it requires you to be willing to go within yourself and to deeply psychically connect with the energies in this deck. Because if you don't, they're just going to give you crappy answers, to be honest. When I was first working with this deck, I kind of didn't know if I liked it really. I didn't know really why I bought it, and kind of reading through the guidebook by itself, I didn't really get it. And so when I did a couple of readings, I got cards that just didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. It was only later when I was like, okay, I really want to work with this deck because I feel like it has something to say, and I really need to listen. So if you're not in the frame of mind for listening and really delving deep within yourself, then I kind of wouldn't recommend really working with this deck. Maybe get something a little lighter if you're looking for a Jasmine Beckett-Griffith, Lucy Cavendish mashup. Get something like Oracles of Shadows and Light or something like that to start off working with a bit of those darker energies, balanced with a bit of the lighter energies as well. Because this deck is quite dark in the way of what it wants from you and what it's good to work for. So I'll just show you this little card if I can. I can't because the sun is in my way. Oh dear. It's the first day of spring. You done? It's the first day of spring, so I thought I would come outside and film because it is actually a beautiful spring day, which is great. So yeah, that's my review on the Vampires Oracle by Lucy Cavendish and Jasmine Beckett-Griffith, published by Blue Angel Publishing. Has 44 cards in it, which is a little bit small for an Oracle deck. But yeah, I thought I would just show you how I work, well, not really how I work with the deck, but how I connect with this deck. And thank you all for watching so much. Thanks to all my new subscribers, hello and welcome. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!